All right. My voice is already actually a little bit fucked too, so I should be able to do twin just nice.
Yeah. Sickness encourages the voice.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, Twin wanted to speak to Jubei. Did we want to say this was just like outside Jubei's room, or meet Jubei like at the evening, the day before
Well,
the
they
Everns
said
fight?
later. They
Yeah,
said
like
later, so I would assume that it was probably just like, maybe Twin would come over to his room before he would, go to bed.
that sounds fair. So, I'll say Jubei's in his room, and you can. I'm assuming you knock.
Yeah.
Anyway, Jubei, uh, hello, who is it?
It is me, Twin. I
Oh,
had wanted to talk with you before.
yes, of course, Twin. Please come in.
Thank you for having me. And he goes ahead and walks on in, takes off the mask, and kind of holds it in between his fingers before kind of looking around and sitting wherever is available.
There's like a chair and desk in Jubei's room where he does a lot of the paperwork to keep this city in fucking working order. Just to see scattered like censuses and tax revenue and building project paperwork.
Like Tsunade's stacks of paper.
Yeah, but Jubei is the only person keeping track of this shit.
The Hokage, understood. But yeah, he'll just sit at the desk table and just kind of watch him.
I assume this is about earlier today with my lack of sleep.
And other behaviors. That is correct.
Well, I suppose it's not surprising that you notice things. You are very observant, Twin. Let
People watching is an aspect of what I do, correct?
I do myself normally as well. I cannot remember, Twin. Did I tell you all that is? Then he kind of looks back out of the window quickly. Is like, have I told you everything that has befallen me in the last few weeks?
No. You have only ever mentioned your deeper past, but as far as the events that have transpired lately, I am not entirely aware.
That is fair. I suppose after a while I forget who I've told and who I have not, but it's perhaps best for you to know. And Jubei, in his robe, will roll up his sleeve, and you will see his arm is like these black, dark tattoos running up his arm with like across his veins and such.
Oh my.
This is this was a gift left over by Skygo when we met him here at the castle.
Skygore.
The Oni that did this to me,
Correct.
as he points at his hair.
So you are saying that you have encountered him twice?
3 times, to be honest. The first time was giving me this hair. The second time was actually the day before we met Everin. He had been destroying a village, killing its people. I was there with Davia and some other former compatriots. We were able to find him. He completely defeated me at that fight. I did not even lay a single blow upon him. But he tore me asunder. He kept me alive. For whatever reason, I do not know. And then the third time, I met him once more at this very castle. But that time, I was a bit more ready, as you'll notice Jubei takes out what looks to be like this strange, like looking ethereal blade of like light and fire.
He tilts his head but stays silent as he watches him close.
Have I mentioned this blade to you?
You have not?
This is called the Blade of the Dawn. I found it a few days after we had battled Skygoa at that village. It was hidden under a tree in a old fort. There is much mystery to this weapon. It is capable of harming and destroying fiends and undead in ways a normal blade has not been able to, but at the same time,
And he takes the sword and passes it through his arm, and nothing happens.
it is ineffective against any other sort of creature.
Interesting. A weapon that seems to be able to only affect the aspects of dark souls, of negative energies, although they would of course have to be more palpable than someone of the likes of Davia, for example.
He looks a little you have a really high perception. Jubei can't lie. So when you say won't work on Davi, you kind of see this kind of look on his face.
Or is it sensitive enough to pick up on her as well?
Apparently, it's not that I attacked her with it, but when I brought it to her flesh, the blade was solid.
Interesting. With that being said, then, I suppose that this must mean that this blade is shrouded in nothing but positive energy, so much so that when interacting with negative energies, it actively rebukes it. I was underneath the impression that someone more diluted like Davia would not cause such a reaction, but it seems that I was wrong.
I would have figured the same, but apparently it does with the other issue, of course, is the stranger part, perhaps. This is a Nipponese blade, yet it was in this country.
Do you wonder where it may have come from?
I do, but stranger than that even. It only works for me.
Hmm. My only means of understanding would be that it may have come from perhaps a god, but I do know, if anything else, something had particularly wanted you to have it. Someone had wanted you to have it.
I suppose that is one way to look at it. To be frank, I
It is
haven't.
only God.
To be frank, I have not been really wanting to think about it much. I took it as a boon and decided to continue forward with it.
I suppose I would not think too much of it otherwise, but it is assuring to seem to know that you have a friend that you have not seen yet.
I never thought about it that way, Twin. It is a very comforting thing you say.
Well, think about it. Isn't it odd that you, a man who has a problem with a very powerful demon, would so coincidentally find a sword that would work very effectively against his kind? One could only assume that, if not serendipity, it was purely a blessing that was bestowed upon you from a friend, a god, something of that sort.
Perhaps my gods could be watching over me even in this distant land, even if I have failed my home country in many ways.
What do you mean, fail?
I did mention I was once a member of the Order of the Rising Sun, correct, Twin?
I believe so.
Well, after what occurred with Skygor and my friend and everything, I fled my country in shame and had been living as a mercenary for several years in this country, drinking, fighting, and trying to forget everything that I was. I have brought much shame to myself and my people from doing this.
That is odd. Perhaps it is just my perception as someone who has grown around death my entire life, but is the purpose of living not simply to survive? This aspect of shame and honor that you seem to carry seems rather minuscule in the grand scheme of your first breath to your last.
Jubei kind of looks at you with a bit of a odd thought to that statement.
That is a interesting way of looking at things, I suppose.
Think about it. I at least happen to know of what had occurred to you since you have told me. To me personally, that sounds, albeit a very unfortunate incident, another twist of fate, a passage of life, and of course death, which, of course, as I said just a second ago, is very unfortunate, but still, to base the rest of your consequence and life off of that single incident is, well, ill-advised, if you were to ask me.
Perhaps you are correct. But in any case, to be fair, I had recently been coming to terms with my past anyways, since I have met this group, in fact. I have been,
That is good.
but in any case, Twin, that is not what has been disturbing me these last few days.
You are right. I became a bit sidetracked. Could you please continue?
It is all right. You probably needed to know all of this to understand the next part as well. In any case, my battle with Skygor in this castle, he had teleported me to a separate realm, a dimension of my nightmares, I suppose. It was a Shadowfell realm, similar to the village where I had lost.
Where it had occurred.
Yes, it had occurred. I battled him ferociously in there, able to actually strike and damage him somewhat with this new blade, causing him at least some harm. Though in the end, I could tell as the fight continued, I was hopelessly outmatched. I escaped the battle by finding a skull that seemed to be the core source of the connection between the realm we were in and the Harwell realm. I smashed the skull despite Skygor warning me that it would trap me in this nightmare realm forever. But I did not believe him, and even if I did, I believed that as long as I was caught in there, he would be as well. In any case, it had freed us, and I was able to return to the battle, where I discovered one of our allies had fallen, and Davia was in dire straits. Luckily, I had moved over to protect them, and we were able to turn the battle around with me joining up. But before he left, he cut me once more with his arm, and did this to me.
As he once again shows you the blackened, veined arm.
Hmm.
To be frank, lately I have been fighting off of its power. I can tell that it is trying to invade my body, trying to weaken my mind and soul. I know for a fact if I do not have the best of fortitude in the morning, it drains my magical potential for the day, making me unable to concentrate and use any sort of high-level magics.
My, How troublesome. And I am sorry that those previous events have occurred to you. I was underneath the impression that this Skygore was more of a cruel individual, but otherwise was more concerned with other things that deal within his realm. But if I'm not to be mistaken, you see, in my opinion, in my belief, death and life are both shows of mercilessness and mercy, no gray area in between. When you find torture, what I like to consider a balance in between life and death, I would like to say that that is beyond immoral, I would say. And in this particular case, it seems as though this Skygore particularly likes to torture you with the things that he is capable of doing.
To say the least, that is very much the case. I'm afraid, though, it is possibly worse than that in the end. What happened with Ayla earlier worries me greatly. It got me thinking. I do not know what the end game of this curse is, and it has been getting stronger over the weeks.
Well, I do not know very much about the nature of this curse, but if you were to give me enough time, I may be able to remove it.
It is a little beyond the average cleric. At the moment, my friend Satoshi has left in search of a way of curing this disease. I am hoping he will be successful soon in returning, but I suppose my biggest concern is there is a slight chance that the similar affliction that affects Ayla with her vampirism, I could be under a similar demonic sort of presence. It is possible, I suppose, that this curse could turn me against all of you, and that terrifies me.
Standing up, Twin kind of moves over towards Jubei, which I kind of have this weird feeling that he has been standing this entire time.
Yeah, pretty much.
And he kind of goes ahead and puts a hand on his shoulder and just kind of gives him an appraising look in the. I'm sorry that you have been holding this weight your entire time.
Yeah, I appreciate the sentiments, Twin. It is a weight I guess I have become so common to hold. I did not realize it was starting to affect me so much till recently.
Well, I know that it is a shortcoming of mine. I have very few analogies that step outside of the aspects of death, but in such, oftentimes once a means happens, something large occurs, it is very oftentimes rare that someone feels an immediate response. It is oftentimes the heaviest of things on the mind that only weigh days, weeks, or months afterwards, even years occasionally.
Very right, Twin. You may be right there. But in any case, there are many reasons I fear turning, but the worst perhaps is breaking of my word.
Your word.
I have made a promise, one I will keep with everything I have, to stay alive. And I intend to keep this promise at all costs, but may I ask you a theoretical question, Twin?
Of course.
Is it wrong to break a promise to one you love, if it is possibly the only way to save them.
Hmm. Within my congregation, one of the things that I combat is the abuse of life. I think that the preservation of life on the greater scale is the only right thing to do and within situations. Now, that being said, I suppose in this particular case, you are questioning this as a means to potentially justify the idea of self-sacrifice in the event that you lose control. But there is one problem I personally have with that. If you were to take your shoes off and put them on someone else, and let us say that Davia, for example, since we had been talking about her before, were to be afflicted with this curse, I doubt that you would ever want to give up on her. In the same way that I doubt that any of us would ever give up on you if you were to succumb to such.
You are not wrong, twin. I would indeed not let any of you go without a great fight, but I don't know. Leadership has its cost, I suppose, but if I did turn on you, I'm not sure if, well, I know you together could stop me, but I mean, look what happened with Ayla when she went mad just now. Imagine if only you and her had been in that room at that time.
I believe that I would have fared well. She seemed to have only been hungry to a fault. In that particular case, it would have been done with, and likely I would have survived. I have a bit more vitality, but I digress. I understand the point that you were trying to make. But my only thing is that I think you are forgetting a very important aspect. As people, most people anyways, we are animals. More importantly, pack animals. The thing that I never understood about particular types of leadership is that it inspires the idea of one ruling over many. But in a ways, when only one is able to call the shots, even though leaderships like kings, for example, are seen to be as strong figures, if they are by themselves, are they ever really strong? So, I think there is one thing you must relinquish within yourself. You talk very fondly of your friends. I do as well, as I've been more than glad to meet every one of you. But there's one thing you seem to be missing. We, as a collective, are there for you as you are there for us. You do not need to carry these weights alone.
Junpei just kind of chuckles when you say that.
I am sorry, twin. I did not mean to laugh, but it's kind of funny, really. Um, you sound a lot like my father when you talk like that.
Hmm.
And not everybody knows this, but my father was in fact the village chief back in my town when I was a boy. And back when I was small, he used to say, a leader is only as strong as those around him who give them the support. A leader without the support of the people around him isn't a leader, merely a tyrant waiting for his head to be removed.
Hmm. To add on to his words, when one leads by one's lonesome, especially without followers, you in a way become a tyrant over your own self, restricting your own movements, because you only will ever listen to what you have to say at the end of the day. Not saying this particularly pertains to you, but I was simply adding an extra commentary.
It is appreciated. I like to think I try to listen to everyone's opinions when it matters, though I
Yes,
do have to try to ignore Davias at times.
but that is what I'm trying to convey, is that I understand, and from what I have seen of you, even just little bits, I've seen how everyone else looks at you. They look to you with eyes of desiring. What would I consider it? They look to you as a leader, that is for sure. But, and he kind of like, his eyes almost like sift kind of left and right as he kind of places his arms on his elbows, and it's just his hands on his elbows. I think the number one thing you must not forget is that you do not need to be at the forefront of every battle.
Perhaps.
I do not mean necessarily within real combat, but even in these moments. Tell me, Jubei, how very often do you allow someone like myself to really get into your head?
I will not lie, twin. So far, the only people I've had a chat quite this deep with is actually Bindavia, and to a much, much lesser extent, Picta.
That is what I mean. When a pack of wolves are together, they are strong because they support one another. Even the alpha, which of course has certain derelictions, certain responsibilities. When they are all hunting in a pack, they are all equals in that moment. But when you separate that alpha, no matter how important it may have been within its group, it becomes just like if it were in a pack. It no longer is an alpha. It is an equal, but with no friends to support. It can get killed easily, chased after easily, and devoured easily by the unforgiving forces of nature. In that same way, we as people operate very similarly. If you isolate one of us, our abilities to be molded, turned, and as he says this, he kind of grows increasingly more uncomfortable as his eyes almost gloss over a bit. Changed. When isolation occurs, these things can happen. And what I'm trying to say is, I believe that you should begin to let in those others more often. The way you talked earlier concerning the idea that maybe if you do not end up fighting this curse, you made it sound like you are going to offer yourself up as a martyr to further and protect the rest of us, but I do not think that is necessary or a smart idea, because in a way that will only affect the rest of the group as a whole. I do not think it is wise of you to think of yourself as purely an individual in these cases, even if you do not realize it. You are isolating.
I see what you mean, twin. That is a very wise way of looking at this. Perhaps with enough time. Let me ask you one last thing, Twin. As a friend,
Yes.
do you believe I should share my concerns with everyone? After, obviously, everything with Everin is finished, we do not need the distraction, but should I let the others know exactly what is happening?
You have seen a formation of geese or pigeons in the sky during the sunsets, right?
Yes, I have.
In their formations, they are constantly speaking with one another, even though it only seems as though they are moving in one direction in an odd formation. Every single passage of wind, every single reception within their tiny little brains, they are constantly speaking with one another. So, to answer your question, Jubei, I do think so. The rest of them, and as well as I, do deeply care about you. This is very much a concern that I believe everyone would absolutely love to hear. Not only would it mean good for the group, but as far as the connections and friendships that I have seen within here, everyone very much cares about you and would love to hear about these concerns. By doing so, you allow them to come in, and I'm sure they would enjoy such, given that you are, yes, their leader, but above all else, friends. Some might even say family.
Thank you for your opinion, Twin. I I think you are correct. When all this is over and things have calmed down slightly, I think I will have to tell everyone about this getting worse. And we may have to come up with plans in case it gets in a situation where you may have to restrain me at the least. Until this
In
is
the
sorted.
event, I have the ability, not immediately now. I do have the capability to remove curses, but if you say that this is bigger and stronger, then perhaps I will not be able to do it at the meantime, but I do think perhaps if I were to perform such a ritual on you, I may be able to at least lessen the effects for a short amount of time.
I suppose
It is, it is just a theory of mine, but
at the very least it may be able to buy me more time. I think it is something worth giving a shot at the very least then. Thank you, my friend Twin. This is a great weight off my mind.
I'm glad to help. Just know that while I do have my own experiences and whatnot, like I had said, I have seen the eyes of the others with Davia, with Ayla, Everin, and he kind of almost smiles a little bit, especially Everin. I've seen the way that she looks at you in particular. They do very much like you. Being able to invite them into your head this way will mean a lot to them, I'm sure, as it does mean a lot to me.
Very well. In any case, this is, as I say, something we will discuss after tomorrow's final battle. I'm sure we'll see quite a display, but for now, unless there is anything else you wish to discuss, Twin, it may be best to rest.
Mm, nothing in particular. Oh, right. So normally, whenever it came to Ayla, I would usually finish off this conversation with an embrace. However, I have noticed that you oftentimes do some sort of bow. Would that be appropriate in this situation? I'm not entirely sure. Is it a Nipponese thing?
I think in this case, twin, I have a better sort of goodbye.
And he's gonna bring his arm out,
Hmm.
and he's gonna wrist lock you, and then bring you in
Ah,
for a bro hug.
damn. All right. Yeah, no. It's like a thing where he just kind of like slowly moves his hand over. It's like kind of realizing it's like, no, it's not the hand, it's the wrist, and then he gets yanked in because he's not as strong as Jubei.
Nobody in this party is as strong as Jubei.
Yeah. So yeah, he's just brought in. It's. I'm glad that I was able to help you, my friend.
Indeed. You are a great asset to us already, twin. And I hope in the future you will be at least be able to assist me if I have any more concerns.
Of course. Mm, I have not been able to say this line yet, given my position with camaraderie, but I believe the line goes as that is what friends are for.
Indeed. And as I said, you are my friend, and I am glad to know the feeling is mutual.
And as he kind of pulls away, he just kind of gives him a rather bright smile. Mm. Even behind the midnight blue eyes of his, just very happy. And of course. Mm.
In any case, I am glad. Now, if you excuse me, twin,
As Jubei looks over at his bed,
I think I need to rest. Hopefully tonight will bring me much more comforting sleeps after such a mind-filling talk.
Of course. And if you have any difficulty, I am able to. I believe the colloquialism is put you under, if need.
For the time being, I think it will be fine. Though
Jubei kind of thinks to himself,
I may need to just remind myself of a better time.
and you will notice Jubei starts humming a little tune to himself as he wanders back towards his room.
He kind of hears this for a moment, and would it be anything that he might recognize, or does it seem rather personal?
I mean, it wouldn't be anything you would recognize unless you are aware of Nipponese lullabies.
Yeah, he wouldn't in particular, but just for a moment, as he kind of hears like the tune, as he kind of goes ahead and probably is getting himself ready for bed, to kind of accompany in this particular case. He goes ahead and his eyes kind of light up just for a bit as he kind of already heard the short little bit of a tune and uses thaumaturgy to kind of allow it to ring inside of the air by itself. Kind of like a music box for just the duration of it, which is only a minute, but even then, he kind of leaves on that note. Literally.
How nice. And Jubei finally gets a good night's sleep, which would mean I didn't have a point of exhaustion during the next scene.